It started on one of those mornings where nothing was going right. The alarm didn't go off. The coffee machine sputtered out a weak, watery brew, and my inbox was already bursting before I'd even left the apartment. I was running late, rushing down the hallway with my bag slipping off my shoulder, mentally calculating how much trouble I'd be in if I was 10 minutes late for work. But the real punch to the gut came when I stepped out into the parking lot and saw it. My spot. The one with my apartment number painted right on the asphalt, the one I paid extra for every month, wasn't empty. Sitting there like it owned the place was that silver SUV. Same dented bumper, same faded baby on board sticker peeling at the edges. I didn't even need to check the plates. I knew that car. I'd been seeing it in my spot for weeks. You'd think a parking spot is just a patch of concrete. But when you live in a crowded apartment complex where finding an empty space at night feels like winning the lottery, that spot is gold. It's convenience. It's safety. It's not having to walk 3 blocks alone in the dark carrying groceries. And it's mine. The first time it happened, I told myself it was probably a mistake. Maybe someone's guest parked there by accident. Maybe they were new and didn't know about the assigned spots. I left a polite note under the wiper, friendly, even apologetic in tone. Hey there, I think you may not know this is a reserved space. Could you please avoid parking here? Thanks. The next night, the SUV was back. No note. No apology, nothing. Just sitting there like my message had evaporated into thin air. I wrote another note, this time less friendly and a little more direct. I didn't swear, didn't threaten, just stated clearly that it was a paid, assigned spot and they needed to stop parking there. When that didn't work, I started paying attention. I noticed the pattern. It was always after 8 p.m., usually late enough that all the guest spots were full, and it was always gone by 7 a.m., like they were sneaking in under cover of darkness. This wasn't someone randomly parking there. This was deliberate. And then one evening, I saw him. The driver, a man in his mid-30s, tall, with dark hair and sunglasses, at night. He had the kind of walk that said rules didn't apply to him. He strolled up to the SUV, unlocked it with a casual flick of the wrist, and got in without so much as a glance at me. I was standing 20 feet away, holding my groceries, and he didn't even acknowledge me. That smug half-smile, when our eyes met for a split second, told me everything. He knew. He knew it was my spot. He knew I was the one leaving notes. And he didn't care. The thing about people like that is they feed off the idea that you won't do anything. That you'll keep leaving polite little notes or quietly grumble to yourself. They count on you giving up. But that night, walking the 3 blocks to my apartment in the dark, juggling grocery bags that were cutting into my fingers, something shifted in me. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about respect, or rather, the complete lack of it. Over the next week, I started observing more closely. I saw him block other cars in without blinking. I overheard neighbors in the hallway complaining about a jerk in a silver SUV who double-parked in guest spots. Once, someone mentioned he even took a motorcycle space, forcing the owner to park in the street. This wasn't a one-time annoyance. This was a pattern of behavior. And I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was quietly furious. Imagine paying for something every month, only to have it stolen from you, again and again, right in front of your face. Imagine walking through a freezing parking lot at night, your arms aching from carrying bags, passing by the warm glow of the space you should be parking in, occupied by someone who didn't pay a cent for it. That mix of anger and helplessness builds slowly, like a kettle just about to whistle. And that's when I knew I was done playing nice. I didn't want to just stop him from parking there once. I wanted to make sure he never parked there again. I wanted him to remember it every time he pulled into this lot, every time he looked at my spot, every time he thought about breaking the rules. But I couldn't rush it. If I was going to do this right, it had to be precise. He had to walk straight into it, thinking he'd won again, only to realize too late that the game had changed. So, I began to plan. It started with learning his schedule, watching from my window without him knowing. When he came, when he left, how long his car sat there. The kind of details most people wouldn't notice, but that I could turn into leverage. And as the days went by, I realized something that made me smile. People like him are predictable, and predictable people are easy to trap. When you want to take someone down without them seeing it coming, the first step is simple. You get close enough that they stop looking at you as a threat. Derek. I finally learned his name from overhearing a conversation in the hallway. Wasn't the type to hide. He wore arrogance like a tailored suit. walking around the complex as if the whole building was his private estate. I started making small moves. Casual, non-threatening interactions. A nod when we passed in the lot. A brief, hey in the hallway. One Saturday morning, the opportunity practically fell into my lap. Derek was outside washing that silver SUV, hose in one hand, sponge in the other, music playing low from his phone. I had a grocery bag in my hand, and as I walked past, I said, "Nice day for a wash." He looked up, squinting behind those ever-present sunglasses. "Yeah," he said, smirking. "Gotta keep her looking good." That's when I noticed something interesting. The back passenger window didn't quite seal. It wasn't broken, just a little off. Like it had been repaired poorly or slammed too hard one too many times. Not important right now, but definitely worth remembering. Every weak point is potential leverage. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my distance but paid attention. His schedule wasn't as random as I'd first thought. Derek usually rolled in after 8 p.m. when guest spots were full, and he'd be gone before sunrise. That was deliberate, avoiding the property manager's office hours. On Fridays, he came in later, around 9:30, and stayed until mid-morning Saturday. He bragged to another tenant one evening about how no one around here can tell me what to do, and how rules are for people who have nothing better to worry about. That single statement told me everything about his mindset. Derek didn't just break rules for convenience. He broke them because he thought it proved he was smarter than everyone else. The more I learned, the more I understood, confronting him would never work. If I tried, he'd probably laugh in my face and park there twice as often just to prove a point. No, if I wanted this to end, I needed something stronger, something that would hit his pride, his wallet, and his confidence all at once. That's when the perfect plan began to take shape. Step 1 was gathering resources. I called an old friend, Mark, who worked for a towing company. I didn't give details, just asked, hypothetically, what could be done if a car was repeatedly parked in a reserved spot without permission. The answers were even better than I'd hoped. With the right documentation, the car could be removed within minutes. No warning, no negotiation. Step 2 was baiting the trap. I knew Derek couldn't resist an empty, convenient spot. If mine was open after 8 p.m., he'd take it. The trick was making sure he thought it was a safe move. I stopped putting up cones or chains, left no notes, and kept my spot perfectly clear when I wasn't using it. I didn't have to wait long for the first strike. It was a packed Friday night, the kind when every spot was taken and cars circled the lot like sharks. I deliberately parked a block away, leaving my spot wide open. At 8:43, like clockwork, the silver SUV rolled in. Derek parked without hesitation, leaning back for a moment like a king surveying his land. That was when I made the call to Mark. The tow truck came in silently, no flashing lights, no drama. In less than 3 minutes, Derek's SUV was hitched up and rolling away, disappearing around the corner as if it had never been there. I stood at my living room window, heart pounding with adrenaline, watching the space return to the way it should be mine. I didn't go outside. I didn't leave a note. I wanted Derek to come back to nothing but an empty patch of asphalt and questions swirling in his head. Was it the property manager? Another tenant? Bad luck? The next morning, I saw him pacing near my spot, phone to his ear, his voice sharp and irritated. I didn't need to hear the words to know he was dealing with the towing company. The fees for retrieval weren't cheap, and knowing Derek, that probably hurt more than the inconvenience. But I wasn't finished. This wasn't a one-and-done revenge. People like Derek need to feel the pressure multiple times before they learn. The real victory would be making him think my spot was a danger zone, a place he'd never risk parking in again. So I waited. I let him have a week of safety, keeping my spot filled when I wasn't using it. I wanted him to think maybe it was a fluke, a one-off incident. I wanted him relaxed before I struck again. The second Friday came, and with it, the perfect repeat. I left my spot empty around 9 p.m., then hid just out of sight near the corner of the building. 10 minutes later, there it was, the silver SUV sliding into place like it belonged there. This time, I called a different towing company. No pattern, no suspicion. Within minutes, Derek's pride and joy was once again being hauled off into the night. And this time, I knew it wasn't just costing him money. It was eating at him. Because now, he wasn't just wondering who had done it. He was wondering when it would happen again. The second morning after a tow is even better than the first. The first time, there's confusion. The second time, there's paranoia. I woke up early, coffee in hand, and stationed myself by the kitchen window again. The lot was quiet, dew still clinging to windshields. At exactly 7:02 a.m., Derek appeared from the side walkway, head turning before his feet even reached the pavement. He stopped short when he saw my spot, empty again, just like the day before the first tow. For a moment, he didn't move. His eyes swept the rows of cars like he expected his SUV to materialize if he stared hard enough. Then his shoulders dropped, and he pulled out his phone. The conversation he had, I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the posture, was one of disbelief tipping into rage. His free hand gestured sharply, palm up, then chopped through the air as if that would make the tow truck materialize in reverse. He paced in tight circles, the phone glued to his ear, before finally stomping toward the street. I smiled into my coffee. From that morning on, Derek's entire demeanor shifted. The confident, lazy stroll was gone. He started parking in the farthest corners of the lot, sometimes even on the street, a man suddenly stripped of his imaginary immunity. I could see it in the way he scanned every car he passed, the way his eyes flicked toward my spot like a man checking if a rattlesnake was still coiled there. But here's the thing about revenge. The best part isn't just watching them suffer consequences. It's watching them live in the shadow of those consequences long after you've stopped doing anything. That was the psychological trap I wanted him in. He needed to believe that my parking spot wasn't just a bad choice. It was cursed. A place that would bring him nothing but expense and humiliation. So I layered it on. Subtly. Every so often, I'd leave my spot open for an hour in the evening, just long enough for Derek to notice. He'd slow his walk when passing it, his head tilting slightly, but he wouldn't dare step closer. Sometimes, I'd come home late and see him circling the lot like a predator that had lost its territory. The fear of the unknown had taken root. He didn't know if I was the one behind the tows. He didn't know if it was the property manager or some random neighbor. And the beauty of it? I never confirmed anything. Not with a glance, not with a smirk, not with a single word. His paranoia started spilling over into his relationships with others in the complex. I overheard him complaining to a neighbor about people with nothing better to do than mess with other tenants. He hinted at moving out if things didn't change. The irony was delicious. The man who thought rules were for other people was now tiptoeing through the lot, avoiding one specific painted rectangle like it was a trapdoor. And in his mind, it probably was. But my plan wasn't over. Not yet. Because Derek had taken my spot for months, and 2 tows, as satisfying as they were, didn't quite balance the scale. I wanted a finale. Something that would leave a mark so deep, he'd never forget. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity was about to drop into my lap. It was a Wednesday night, the kind of evening where the air is cool and the lot is half empty, because most people are still at work. I'd just gotten home when I spotted something unusual. Derek's SUV wasn't in the far corner or on the street. It was sitting 2 spaces away from my spot. That caught my attention. He hadn't parked that close in weeks, not since the second tow. It was as if he was testing the waters again, dipping his toe in to see if the curse was real or just bad luck. And here's the thing. People like Derek, the arrogant ones, they can't resist testing limits. They need to push just to see if someone will push back. That little habit of his was about to become my greatest weapon. The next 2 days, I made sure my spot stayed visible and empty during the early evening, right when he usually came home. I wanted him to see the temptation. And sure enough, on Friday night, I watched from my window as he slowed his SUV while passing my space. He didn't take it. Not yet, but I could feel it coming. Saturday was the day it all lined up. The complex was hosting some kind of open house event, and the lot was packed. People were parking blocks away, carrying lawn chairs and grocery bags, kids running between cars. I knew Derek wouldn't be able to resist. Around 8:15 p.m., I moved my car to the street, leaving my spot wide open like a beacon. Then I went back inside, lights off, and positioned myself where I could see everything without being seen. At 8:37, the silver SUV rolled in. Derek paused for barely a second before sliding into my space like it was his birthright. I could almost hear the smug sigh through the glass. This time, I didn't call the tow company right away. No, this was going to be different. I pulled out my phone and dialed a different friend, one who worked with the property's contracted security team. I told him exactly what was going on and asked for a favor, the kind that required a clipboard, a camera, and an official-looking violation sticker. 15 minutes later, A security vehicle pulled up quietly. My friend stepped out, took several photos of the SUV, and began filling out a bright orange violation notice, the kind that's impossible to peel off in one piece. He slapped it right on the driver's side window, dead center, where Derek would have to stare at it for the entire drive home. Then came the twist. Instead of calling for a tow immediately, my friend placed a temporary wheel lock, bright yellow, loud as a siren without making a sound. It wasn't going anywhere until someone from the towing company came to remove it. And because it was the weekend, that meant extra fees. I stayed up late enough to see Derek return. It was almost worth the months of frustration just to watch his reaction. He approached the SUV casually at first, key in hand, but froze mid-step when he saw the sticker. His head tilted, reading it. Then his hand shot out to rip it off, only for it to tear in jagged, tiny pieces. He tried again, cursing under his breath, but it only got worse. And then he saw the wheel lock. You know that moment when anger turns into full-blown panic? That's what I saw on his face. He crouched down, pulled at it, even kicked the tire once, as if brute force might work. It didn't. He paced, he made calls, and eventually, he sat in the driver's seat with his head against the steering wheel. The tow truck didn't arrive until after midnight, and when it did, the driver made no effort to be discreet. The clanking of chains, the flash of hazard lights, the slow lift of the SUV, it was all loud and public. Several neighbors came out to watch. By the time the truck rolled away, Derek was standing alone in the middle of the lot, jaw clenched, arms crossed, avoiding everyone's eyes. He walked inside without a word. After that night, Derek never parked in my spot again. In fact, he barely parked anywhere near my building. Within 2 months, the silver SUV was gone entirely, and word around the complex was that he'd moved out. I never admitted to anyone what I'd done. Not directly, but every time I pulled into my space, I felt that quiet, private satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you didn't just win. You ended the game completely. And maybe that's the real moral here. If someone takes something from you again and again, don't just take it back. Make sure they can never take it from you again. Now, your turn. What would you have done in my place?